I do believe in fairies. I do believe in fairies. I do. I do. Oh, yeah. What's going on? My name is John, and this is Cinema Saturday. Today, I got a movie review for Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare. This is a 2025 horror movie that follows, Wendy and the gang from the original tale, as the youngest brother is actually abducted by Peter Pan, who is a little different this time around than from the original story. And Wendy goes on a mission to try to save her brother, and of course, hijinks ensue. Now, lately, we've seen a lot of movies like this, a lot of old IPs that have become public domain, as like Winnie the Pooh, most popular with Blood and Honey, and their sequel, Blood and Honey 2. I know there are several Mickey Mouse Steamboat Mickey's movies coming out, so it's a trend because it's very cheap to make a horror movie, and with that public domain, you could probably get a more get an audience in to see your movie just based on the IP name. So I think that's what they're that is the track of the trend right now. But I've never saw Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 1 or 2, so I'm kind of new to jumping into this new fantasy horror of old IP space. So this movie is a lot like those movies. You go in, you thinking it's going to be a C-grade horror movie. Not very good, very, very, very low budget. But surprisingly, I would say this is more of a B-grade horror movie than a C-grade horror movie. It was a lot better than I was expecting. Like, honestly, I went in thinking this was going to be a pretty trash movie, but I left having a decent time at the theaters. This movie is actually very loosely based on Peter Pan itself. I think like they really only share the names of things, and then after they share those names, the similarities between the projects pretty much end. There are really not many similarities other than, Neverland is a physical place, and there are people in the movie named Peter and Wendy, and there's a Tinkerbell, but story wise, pretty much it's not the same at all. The story itself is pretty meh. I think there could have been stronger moments written into the script, so that's not really the movie's strongest point, but I do think what saves this movie from becoming a C movie and gets it a B-rate horror movie is that it has decent acting. I was actually surprised by the acting. I really thought we were going to have horrible, horrible line reads, but actually, I would say Peter Pan, probably the standout of the movie. He does this thing when he changes his voice to sound like an innocent kid to try to lure in other kids, specifically boys. He tries to sound like, an innocent boy. It's like, hey, dude, we're just trying to have fun. But then he's crazy, so it'll switch in a second. He'll go into like a real deep grown man voice, and it's just the contrast between the two is so striking that you're like, oh wow, you're crazy. You're crazy. So I think Peter did a really good job in his performance. I thought Wendy did a very good job in her performance as well. I thought she was pretty real. I thought that, Wendy could have been a real person in our world, and she wasn't trying to be some, what do they call it, Miss Sue or Susie May. One of those very bland characters like Wendy probably was from the original movie, the original story. So I thought Wendy did a really good job. And I will also say, no spoilers, Tinkerbell did a good job here as well. I think I'm going to do maybe a little spoiler section at the end with some theories. So I got some theories that I just need to get off my chest because there's some shots that we need to talk about. But moving on to the more non-spoiler things. So another thing that saved this movie was that it had amazing gore. For a horror movie, that's almost one of the things you have to check off the boxes. If you're not doing a really scary atmosphere, you gotta do some gore, right? Because you gotta have that draw. Why are we going to see this movie? And I will say the gore does not disappoint. This movie is not for the faint of heart. So if you're squeamish at all at blood or body parts not being a part of people's bodies, this might not be the movie for you. But if you don't mind that sort of thing, it's a fun time. They did a really good job with the gore. And I would say it was not. I would say that it is as gory as something like maybe Terrifier. Not on the same scale, but the first Terrifier movie was pretty gory, and I would say this movie kind of follows in the footsteps. However, this movie does not have that one standout gory scene that you're just like, I'm going to remember this movie for that scene specifically. So overall, Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare was a fun time at the cinemas for me. If you go in and you turn that brain all the way off, I think you can have a good time. Don't go in expecting this to be the best horror movie ever made, but surprisingly, it's not the worst horror movie ever made because it has passable acting, kind of good gore, and even some surprises. It was fun to see what they did with the Peter Pan story and what aspects of that story they took and placed in their movie to give it, the same type of name. So that was very interesting. So I think if you are a horror fan, you don't have to see this one. Well, this actually had a limited release. So if you're a horror fan, you don't really have to go see this movie. It's probably better to catch it on a streaming service when it comes out. But I definitely think if you haven't seen this movie by this upcoming Halloween, then I think this is a good Halloween party movie. You can throw it on in the background or really just hang out with some friends and watch it. You can kind of make fun of it, but I think it's honestly and truthfully like a legit horror movie with maybe some subtext that kind of makes you think just a tiny bit, but I think it's good. I think you'll have a good time. So those are my thoughts on Peter Pan, Neverland's Nightmare. Not as bad as I thought it was going to be. My name is John. This was Cinema Saturday, and as always, have a good one.